Have you been invited on?
I have not.
Wow.
I know.
Piers
Thankfully.
Morgan, if you are listening.
No, Piers. I don't think I'm ready.
Would you go in?
I think it just depends, isn't it? See, this is the thing though. I always think, can I give a benefit if I go on it, right? I'm gonna just say I'm not gonna be crazy on there. I'm not gonna fight with him. I don't think I'm gonna give him what he wants, which is a riled up, frantic, crazy, you know.
Osama, as a PR, from
Would you
a PR perspective,
recommend-
would you advise Zara if she was invited to go in or not?
I wouldn't advise anyone to go on Piers Morgan show.
Got elected baptism of fire because that Women's Hour Radio 4. I mean, I was averaging about 9 interviews a day. I think people couldn't comprehend how mainly imams and men had voted like a young 29-year-old from Glasgow as the Secretary General of the Muslim Council. But maybe that's where I had that really hostile interview. But I also had commentators saying I was a pleasant face away from a cross-eyed bearded man. So, and I quote, so I think at the start, what I realized was we had changed, but certain segments of the media had not. And what I've realized in the 3 years I've been in term is that media has very strong narratives on Islam and Muslims, and they haven't changed, actually. Even the better bits of media are not. They only come to us for Islamophobia, counterterrorism, immigration, like really negative stuff.
I phoned one of my students who's now in Sheffield. He's a GP. He's Palestinian. He's from Gaza. And just want to touch base with him, see what's happening. And, he tells me there's a couple of his members of his family just been killed the day before, and he has to leave the call. I catch up with him after the podcast, and there's a whole section of his family killed. After one of the classes, we finished a book, and the end of it was a signature of one of my teachers who I finished the book with, and it was the anniversary of his death. He'd been killed by the Shia militia in Damascus. His father had been hunted down, decapitated, and put in front of his house. And I reminded him at that point, which was about, I think this was at 2014, I said, I pray that this never happens to any of us. This type of bloodshed and carnage, that we don't see it. But the reality is the historical view of what's happening is a real view. I mean, there is this sense of helplessness that, that we've apparently built so much. We've got political leadership in the highest office in the UK. And for young people specifically, when I speak to young people, it's as if, look, what you people in your 40s and 50s said you've achieved isn't actually nothing. But that belies the fact that there's a historical view to this as well, which I think is the Quranic view, which is, it comes out in the story of the Prophet Musa and Harun, in which they pray to God and beseech God to destroy Pharaoh. And God says that I've accepted your dua. But in the books of Tafsir, it mentions it's 40 years until that dua is accepted.
It's a problem not just within the Muslim community. As soon as someone sees a potential prime minister say they don't care if a group of people don't have food and don't have water and don't have electricity, the message that goes out is this person could do anything to anybody. This isn't just a Palestinian issue. It becomes a wider issue. And this also is playing out in the US, where the people I'm speaking to in America are saying, look, we're not going out. We campaigned hard for Biden. He was literally sent to Israel and told to tell Netanyahu, stop building settlements. Just stop it so that we can try something in terms of long-term sustainable peace. He flew in, gave that message, and as soon as he flew out, Netanyahu did what? He said, build more settlements. So what Biden learned from that, I think for this time, was he tried to hug the infamous now, hug Bibi strategy. Hug him close, make him feel wanted, make him feel loved, and therefore we might have influence. And what that's been proven is that doesn't work either. And you don't have the comfort of at least having the moral high ground.
The Islamophobia definition. The people involved, I know them. And I think that the problem is that scholars cannot engage in that kind of discussion in a way that they're taken seriously. It's not nuanced enough. It's not precise enough for that arena. So there's a reason why they're sidelined in some way. And so one of the big problems, I think, in the Muslim community in the UK and in Europe, not as much in America, is that there's no onboarding of scholarly voices on the types of boards and committees that deal with these types of
The
questions.
scholarly point is really tricky as well, because it becomes political again. Which scholars do you go to? How do you include them all? Then it becomes another like, oh, you went to that one, you didn't go to that one, and it's very tricky. I've always tried to engage scholars.
Be constructive. And I think if anyone's doubting that change is possible, look at the example from the LGBT community. You go back decades, and if we think the Muslims are demonized, LGBT people in this country face much worse. It was dangerous. And the Stonewall riots is where the fight back began. And this was a case where an LGBT bar was raided by the police and people were badly beaten. And in the aftermath of that, activists got together and thought, what are we going to do? Now, what did they do? Did they organize a campaign against homophobia and to talk about homophobia as the chosen frame? They did not. And I think we know what they did. That's where Pride was born. So rather than take on a victimization slant and appear in the media and complain about being victims, they literally took to the streets in a sea of color and rainbows and invited people to join them. And people did.
It's a question of courage, isn't it? Like at certain points, you as a person, if you feel you need to say something that will essentially not land well with your expected constituents in your own community, are you a type of person that will still say it because you know to be true to yourself, you have to say it? So I think that's where people that have the ability to amplify their voices, they have to make that choice for themselves and where they have the courage to do that.